It's probably the most disruptive time in college athletics since probably Title IX. Lots of changes going on with conference realignment. We've had major changes to uh, everything from the business of sports. We've got a whole bunch of changes that are going on across the country, but NIL has been thrust upon us in 2021 when the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to limit student athletes from making money on their name, image, and likeness. And so we wanted to put together a really diverse panel of folks who come from different angles of how it's impacting their careers and their lives, and not only from the student athletes, but from coaches and obviously from business as well. So we've got three great panelists, starting with Coach Bakich, baseball coach here at Clemson. Rashard Hall, who was a former captain of the Clemson football team and worked in the athletic department supporting NIL initiatives. And Brian LaFemina, who's been a number of different things in professional sports and now has an investment firm that is doing some incredible things. So three different perspectives, how it's impacting their lives and their careers and the disruption that's had. There's a lot of different myths out there about what NIL is. I don't think we've seen 15 Lamborghinis driving through here, although there's a few at Georgia, but what used to be the bag man, dropping money on players to encourage them to come to schools is something that has been legitimized and allowed now. But this conversation is going to be fantastic because we do have three people who are in the middle of it all. So I'll start with Coach Bakich and just talk about how it's changed your life and what coaching is like today and what things you deal with today that you didn't have to deal with years ago.
Sure. Well, I'm a huge proponent for NIL in the college baseball realm because historically, playing college baseball meant taking on student loan debt. We're an equivalency sport. As of right now today, we still operate under 11.7 scholarships. So on a 40-man roster, 11.7 are on scholarship, 28.3 are not. The value of that, about a 50-50 in-state, out-of-state, that's about 1.2 million that our players are paying to come to school. So NIL for us has always been not pay for play, it's been pay your bills. And so for us, we've been a huge proponent of NIL because our players are using it as a way to pay for school, and we're using it as a way to subsidize our 11.7. So it's been a huge opportunity for our guys to help with their out-of-pocket costs and help not have to take on student loan debt.
Rashard, talk about, as you were working with our football players.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a lot of excitement when this came to fruition. What's the reality? What's really happened?
I remember day one, I was so excited for DJ Uyunglele when he signed the Dr. Pepper commercial and opportunity there because it was the biggest NIL deal historically to start with. So that was when it first started, literally for the whole nation, but Clemson football and Clemson athletics for sure. But the evolution, I love NIL. Like when I was a scholar athlete here, I remember being ambitious and wanting to, write the book to be able to sell it or to be able to do part-time, my own entrepreneurial kind of endeavors. But compliance was like, whoa, anything with your name on is going to get you a violation, can't be done there. But, NIL, I love it, but the reality is when it came out, everybody saw it as pay for play. Like everybody gets a piece of the pie and they're making 6 and 7 figures when the actuality of it is, only the top 1 or 2%, and usually in football and basketball are seeing 6 or 7 figures, right? So what you see on TV and what the media kind of fantasizes about NIL and the ways to make money, it's false reality a little bit. And I kind of think about for all scholar athletes, NIL is the opportunity now to create. Like, think about it. For 150 years, athletes didn't have the rights to their own name, image, and likeness, and now they do. So for most scholar athletes, as coach is saying, it's now the opportunity to create for your own. Like, the college athlete is more sophisticated than ever. Like, your intellectual properties and opportunities we have in NIL now are amazing. But yeah, just bring it back down to a level playing field of reality. Still the 1-2% are seeing 6 and 7 figures. The Shador Sanders of the world, if you will. That's probably the name you see the most, but that's the kind of reality of it.
Um, Brian, talk about your background and the evolution of you've been in professional sports. You've seen, the difference between college athletics and what happens when they turn professional. What are some things that you're seeing as an investment firm and things that you want to, get involved with?
Sure. Well, I think about this on a couple of different levels. As a former college athlete, I sort of have one perspective of it, working for 30 years in professional sports, thinking about what the evolution is going to be at universities, at conference levels, where this business is really going. And then, as an investor, we think about that as well. And then finally, I spent 5 years in the Olympic movement. So not only what's going to happen with the money sports, if you will, college football and college basketball, but what's the downstream impact of the Olympic sports, and what kind of impact does that have, literally all the way to how many gold medals does the United States win going forward in the Olympic Games if the funding dries up, because so much revenue is going to be going towards the money sports. So it really plays out on a lot of different levels, and I think that we're at an incredibly unique time and a crossroads where there are so many unknowns that there's a great opportunity to sort of create the new world of what collegiate athletics is going to look like. But it's going to get messier before it gets cleared up. And I think, everybody's just going to have to be very intentional about understanding, what the downstream ramifications are. It's easy to say, hey, we should pay college football players and basketball players, which I've changed my thinking 180 degrees. I used to be against that. I'm all for it now. But I think we can't take it out of the context of what are all the impacts that are going to take place with that one decision. So we're excited about this conversation to hear these two gentlemen and how they think about it.
I've gotten to know Coach Bakich, and he's great about what happens on the field. But what's most impressive is the way he's looking at this as an opportunity to take Clemson baseball and leverage this opportunity in NIL to develop new opportunities to bring fans into the game, to help our student athletes and the things that they want to do. Talk a little bit about some of your initiatives and the things you're getting behind to help your guys.
Sure. Well, part of this is there is the pay-for-play component that Richard mentioned, and that's very prevalent. But I would say for us, it's if we're gonna really engage in this, it's to retain our best players. Of course we want to attract the best, but we have to retain our best as well. So absent of this gigantic collective slush fund that a lot of coaches just operate out of, and they pull money and hand it over here, we don't have that. Not many schools do. There's a handful of schools that have this gigantic collective with millions of dollars, and they started in 2021. But I think this opportunity, the time we're in now, favors people who are creative thinkers. And collaborating with Andy, he had the best idea of any idea that I've heard in the NIL space. You have your typical collectives where money in, money out, and there's a tax implication with that. And then you have true NIL, how the business solicits the athlete, hey, because you're really good, we want to help you to help us sell stuff, and so we want to hire you for advertising, marketing, whatever. And then Andy had this great idea, and he's like, instead of waiting for college baseball players to be approached by a business, how about if we make the student athlete the business? I said, what do you mean? Tell me more. And he's like, well, what if we use this launch pad and these creative ideas of all these entrepreneurs and create an LLC, and the athlete becomes the service provider, and they could then be the business that a donor or somebody wants to attract. And so if Jaron Purify or Dominic Listy, who are sitting up here, wanted to start a business and, they offer experiences and, you could, what's your favorite food, JP? Tacos. You want to, JP, if you want to take him out for tacos, well, it'll cost you, but you get that experience of taking JP out for tacos, right? Or Dom, what's your favorite hobby, Dom? Let's just say golf. Right? Dom's a big weightlifter, but Dom's a
As we
big
can see.
weightlifter, but let's just say it's golf. And if you want to take Dom provides the service, his business provides experience of going golfing with Dom. And it'll cost, but you get at least a memory. And that's the big problem I see in the NIL space right now. Once the IRS came in and stripped NIL and collectives of their 501c3 status, then donors they don't want to give because they want to give, it's just not a tax benefit. They still give, but it's not as lucrative to them. And then for our players, this is where I see a real problem is they're getting taxed on those NIL dollars. So we're asking donors to give after-tax dollars, and then our players are getting taxed on those dollars coming in, and they're using those dollars to pay their bills, and they're getting taxed on it. And scholarships aren't a taxable income. So you have all these friction points already baked in, but I loved Andy's idea of, hey, let's make the student athlete the business, and now instead of just donating to a collective or, whatever, now we actually can create a memory, and it's a great entrepreneurial lesson for these guys to get to, be a business owner. And obviously they're managing their time with school and sports, but man, what a cool and neat opportunity for them to engage in.
We've allowed our students from the Spear Institute to partner with our student athletes to help them build We've got 9 websites that have been built to date. Different athletes want to do different things. Some are willing to do a website that's promoting a nutrition plan, an exercise plan that's gated and paid for. Others have, been solicited by young athletes to learn how to be a sidearm pitcher. So we've created Subby University with a logo and a website. Now folks can be promoted and directed to that website where they can enroll in a curriculum that is then paid for. So it's great for our students to participate in this, partner with our student athletes. There's 525 new entrepreneurs on campus as a result of NIL. So it's been a start this summer, and we're going to continue to build on it. So Purify Water's coming, I bet. We're going to make that happen. It's going to be great.
And if I can touch a little bit of that, because Coach is exactly right. Like in our business, at least when I was playing 08 through 12, we're all the way up into 2021, athletes saw their body as their business, right? My body is my business, and taking care of it is going to help me get to that next level of the dream I've been dreaming of since I was 7 years old. Well, now, like I said, with the college athlete being more sophisticated than ever, we're able to transition that to the intellectual properties and opportunities now, because NIL has been kind of reduced to just what can I receive? What can I receive to license out my name, image, and likeness? And, I'm working on a trademark now because I think one thing's missing out of NIL, and that's the O. That's the ownership, right? The ownership for JP to be able to say, hey, I want to bet on myself, and I can create. And just like you said, there's so many future CEOs, including himself, around campus. Let me attach and build a team. Like, I love the aspect of, I'm a big nonprofit guy, and I kind of think about it this way. If you got someone with the resources, someone that's a knowledgeable scholar, and someone with the influence, man, what can't we do to change the world? So I love the way athletes like that are thinking these days. So Coach is exactly right.
It's, these opportunities, Tom Brady's got TB12, a brand that he created, during his professional career. But imagine if Tom Brady had created that brand back in school, and where that brand might be, throughout his career. And this opportunity to take these young student athletes to help them better understand what skills and interests they have and turn those into potential businesses. You're on the other side of this. You're on the investment side. I mean, is it too far to out to think that maybe there's an opportunity to invest in these businesses that could have real revenue and brand potential?
No, I think there's definitely an opportunity for that. But again, there's still going to be a very limited number of athletes who are going to have the resonance to actually do that with a branding opportunity. I love where you're going, which is sort of, as young people, investing in themselves and creating opportunities from the platform they do have here at Clemson University or other universities to create businesses and ownership. which ultimately, a small percentage, as we know, of every athlete at college, even in football and basketball, make it to the next level. But they are celebrities here. They do have a platform here. They do have an opportunity here. And why not create something that is going to have ownership and equity for them? So yeah, I do think that does exist. I think institutional investors, maybe not so much. It just doesn't scale unless you're the very best athlete in the country.
Livy Dunn, right, is a brand that, blew up during COVID and since, and I mean, with 20 million, 25 million, viewers, that's a real brand that's got potential, right,
sure.
for investment.
For sure. But again, I think that at a more local level, there are, alumni here at Clemson University who will definitely invest in these athletes and their futures. I think they'd probably like to do that more than actually just giving to an NIL collective, which is kind of nameless and faceless, and you don't exactly know how that's all working, as opposed to investing in a specific athlete who's got a really good idea. So I do think that there's something to that.
Brian, what do you think the downsides of NIL? What are some things that, everyone's worried about and they have every reason to be worried about it?
Look, I think NIL is a stopgap. It's a means to an end to solve, a problem, but I don't think that's the long-term solution. I think that ultimately we're going to get to a place where there's going to be more direct payments coming from universities to players. I think that's more controllable. I think, it creates some transparency that maybe doesn't exist in some NIL collectives. And I think ultimately where this needs to go, and more specifically in football and maybe a little bit in basketball, is there needs to be a democratization of the talent that exists in football in this country. I think right now, if you take professional sports as an example, if you're in the NFL and you take the worst team in the league, you get the first draft pick, right? And that kind of keeps some competitive balance. Right now, if you're Georgia, you can get 30 first-round draft picks every single year. So all the best players are sort of gravitating to 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 schools. Well, ultimately, if you want to build a strong, ongoing business, and let's face it, these are media businesses, you have to have as many teams as competitively balanced as possible, that have a chance to win a championship as deep in the season as possible. And the way that collegiate athletics is set up right now, it doesn't do that. The strong get stronger, and the weak or the mediocre kind of stay where they are. So I think there's going to be some transformational change coming. And I think you're going to have the strongest probably pushing back the hardest to try to keep that change from happening. But ultimately, I think that there's just too many good outcomes from trying to find a way to have the best athletes in the country all playing, as opposed to being, QB4 at a top tier school. They could be QB1, 50 other schools, and really create an opportunity for themselves to play at the next level.
With the recent, in addition to this, we've had re-rostering of the sports, but we also have an opportunity with the settlement where direct payments can go to the players here coming up. How's that going to affect, baseball and things that you're trying to do?
Yeah, so Andy's talking about the rev share of 20 million of all the schools, and when it comes down to it, it'll be more like 18 million. But I don't know how big of an impact it'll have for baseball. I think it won't necessarily be equitable based on how many sports or gender or anything. It'll be what percentage of the sports actually produce the revenue, and they're going to get the biggest chunks, kind of as they should. So I think you'll see a huge percentage of that, upwards of 80% or more, go to football, and then the next highest percentage go to men's basketball, followed by women's basketball. And then I think baseball will probably fall into the other category. So if it does produce some financial outcome for us where we have additional money to provide, then great. But I think all of that right now is written in pencil in some judge's chamber, and I'll believe it when I see it.
Facts.
You're embarking on a new career, and it's tangential to NIL and helping support our student athletes with career opportunities, experiences. Talk a little bit about that, and where is NIL playing in your new startup and what you're trying to accomplish?
Indeed, would love to talk about it because it's thing I'm passionate about. It's what I've been called to do, and it's scholar athlete development, player development. And the interesting thing is, what I love is when you do right by your scholar athlete, when you invest in them as the future husband or wife or CEO that they're going to be one day, there's great things that happen. And I got to see that within Clemson football and Paul Journey, which is the paragon of student athlete development, right? So we've been able to do things like take trips to Los Angeles and New York and have our scholar athletes explore, the Googles and the Netflix and the uninterrupteds of the world. 8 diverse industry trips when you're on those trips and uncover opportunities that your intangibles can transition into, or maybe the 52 students that just came back from internships with 21 companies from London to California. Again, talking about the Def Jam records and the Googles of the world. But again, investing in our scholar athletes created a huge recruiting advantage that we didn't see coming, but it's real and prevalent here. Every head coach, I promise, that comes out of Dabo Swinney's tree is going to end up having them a Paul Journey. Brent Venables has one. Tony Elliott's building one. Coach will be here this weekend. Just thought about that. But it's the opportunities that happen. So for me, my calling was, while I played for Clemson University and my alma mater, which I love, I wanted to be able to touch all athletes worldwide, professional and collegiate athletes. So my startup, Scholar Athlete Elite, elite standing for empowering leaders of influence through experiences. JP, you may agree with me here, or tell me if you disagree, but if I told you you could be the best baseball player Clemson has ever seen, but I never let you actually go practice or play in a game to validate that, it would be hard for you to believe. It's the same thing with athletes with rare set of intangibles. We got to put them in the career field to have the practical experiences so that they know that they can be that. I had a trip, Gateway to World Market, shameless plug, look it up. It's a trip by our marketing department, but I went on that trip as a 20-year-old, and of course, I always wanted to play for the NFL team. But going up to New York and seeing executive leaders, by the way, making $800 million a year, doing some of the stuff, I maybe a little arrogant as a 20-year-old, but I can do that. I came back wanting to own the NFL team, right? So while it sounds like a cliche saying, that was a real mindset shift for me. So now I desire for all athletes to have that. And then again, y'all can kind of hear my heart from the NIL perspective and ownership. I take an untraditional approach. Like, I literally want that to happen. I'm a new author myself, and I want athletes to be able to tell their stories. So working with a publisher, I can sit down and talking about AI now. I can sit down with a scholar athlete, and we can pick a theme book, and we can do an in-depth survey and interview, and then we can take AI software and turn that into a manuscript like that can be edited. Now he has 8 forms of revenue streams just off of a book, right? You can sell the book, you can do speaking, you can do workshops, you can do e-courses on your website, different things of that nature. So that's the direction that my company's headed. And lastly, just example, is Duke basketball said we want a Paul Journey type program that's going to help develop our scholar athletes at a high level, fulfilling our commitment and promise to parents and scholar athletes, but bring a recruiting advantage at the same time. I'll consult them 16 to 24 months in making that kind of internal program happen.
By the way, this is so needed, and it's obvious when you talk about it in the context of collegiate athletes. I can't tell you how many pro athletes are in the same position. So when I was at the NFL, we would have an internship program where current active players would come in for a couple of months, and they would do different jobs inside the league office to see about what their transition, after the athletic career was over, what that was going to look like. And I see more and more athletes or former athletes that are now in executive roles at teams, at the league, in other businesses that are associated with sports. So getting young athletes to understand that there's this world outside, and after your athletic competition is over, and getting them to get an early jump on that, it's good for you, man. It's so needed.
Brian, your experience in professional sports. So is it possible that NIL and introducing these opportunities and dollars coming into their pocket earlier is going to make them better prepared when the big contracts come in for professional sports, and better prepare them for financial management? Talk a little about what you've seen in professional sports, the challenges that they have, because it's all just a big money dumped on them then.
Yeah, I on one hand, I wish I knew, and on the other hand, I'm glad I don't know what it's like to have multi-million-dollar contract when I'm 22 years old. I can't imagine what that would be like, but I've certainly worked with enough people who've been in that situation, and it's something we got to, frankly, as an industry, get better at. I don't think we come close to preparing people for what that's like, and you know, lots of people who've helped you along the way, who think that you owe them something, and I've seen a lot of people, run through a lot of dollars, unfortunately, and not set themselves up. So I think that that financial literacy is something that should start to take place when somebody's a college athlete, but it has to keep going through. So it's a real challenge, but I would hope that if they start thinking like business people when they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they will be better prepared when they make that transition to the next level.
You have to put them in microcosms to be able to do it. That's why I love experiences so much. Like one thing we know about young people, about people in general, we're going to spend money. You know, you're not going to stop young people from spending money. It's just shaping them about how to spend it the right way, to begin with the end in mind, to really think about, hey, you got great ideas. Okay, let's save up some of this money. So when you have all your time, we can really dig into it and invest and learn from the mentors that's going to, man, y'all have so many great opportunities here, this launch pad and mentorship, not just student athletes, obviously, but the whole student body. But you're exactly right. Exactly right.
Love to open it up for questions. And if anybody's got something they want to ask about NIL, we can keep this going. Come on, Jim.
Gentlemen, you guys are awesome. And this Launchpad, Clemson here, having this is far above most places to ever have something like this. So I have a few questions here, and you guys have touched on all this, but me working in professional sports and watching the young men, and I deal with a lot of young men that come in, and I have for a long time. And but like what I'd like to see, so I've heard your views. My view, I am from North Carolina. I went to Michigan State. I go up there, to a totally different environment, which was extraordinarily educational, which I think a lot of students and people should do is travel to see what it's like in all kinds of places. I get there, the philosophy was out of state back then, this is in the early 80s. I mean, my scholarship was worth well over $100,000. And that's investment. That's $100,000 that my family or I didn't have to pay off. So when we're talking about paying players on top of a scholarship, I know back then it was a situation where the normal, the regular student in school that might even be there on academic scholarship, there was a lot of jealousy towards athletes because they didn't think it was fair. Now we can look at it a million different ways. What I experienced, which really opened my eyes, I was with a lot of athletes that came from inner city Detroit, and they had nothing. I mean, nothing. Back then, you couldn't even work a job.
Yep.
And we were on the quarter system. We didn't have time to even work a job. You might have had a month, and then you were back for football. By the time you finished school in late June, and then you're back for football in late July, August. So it hit me back then that, my parents could give me some money to go off campus to eat or get a hamburger somewhere, not just to eat on campus. These people couldn't do that. They couldn't do it. So I sat there, and back then it was something different for me to see. I also was with hockey players that might have came to school for 1 year and took off. The great thing about football is that you're forced to spend 3 years before you can turn professional. And you get a little bit more education. I think baseball, I see more and more guys coming to school, instead of just going the route of the single and double A type of situation. So, I see this, but right now at the NIL, you're turning 17-year-olds into professionals. They have no way of managing their money. One thing I want to point out is, do you think it's the school or the NCAA to make sure these kids are educated on how to handle money? Or if we're going to pay them to play, is to escrow the money so that by time they get a portion of that, by time they finish their college education or how many years they put into it, they have money when they leave school. And they have a better understanding of how the money works. If the NIL, we don't know which way it's going, but me being in pro sports, it seems like it's heading in the direction you're going to end up having part of your football staff. You're going to have a general manager. You're going to have a salary cap analyst. It's going to be a salary cap. There's going to be a set amount of money. And if it's pay for play, then why have scholarships? You know, if there's a budget and a salary cap, then why are we giving scholarships? Why don't we just pay the player to pay for their school and give them an amount of money? Okay, so I also see with Power 5 in this day and time, the amount of money that's in it, they can survive. But when you take other schools that aren't Power 5, how is this affecting them, and where are their programs going, their other sports? Is it going to turn into simply intramural sports with a lot of places? So there's a lot of questions out there, but I just, I want to throw that because you guys have touched on it all, but there's a lot of aspects of this that I think really affect.
Anybody want to touch on those?
Sure. I think a financial literacy class, to one of your points, is imperative. My wife and I joke all the time, why did we learn about parallelograms and the periodic table? Why did nobody teach us about taxes, right, in school? And you don't get that unless you go into a specific route. But I think there's a huge opportunity now for financial literacy for a lot of these guys. They can certainly speak to football. Baseball is, again, a different animal because our players are using NIL to pay their bills. And we have a couple of players that have now established themselves or maybe are earning a little bit on top of that, but it's nowhere near six figures, right? So I still think the scholarship is very beneficial. Like, we're really looking forward to an increase in scholarship. Number one, it gives us a lot more access to the value of being able to tell families that you don't have to take out student loan debt, but you don't get taxed on a scholarship. And with the amount of money that we deal with, we wouldn't want to create a tax event for our players unless they're earning over and above the cost of attendance. So to answer your question about, and I think you touched on it too a little bit, some of these other schools at the mid-major and small D1 level, yeah, they're in trouble. They're in real trouble. If you've got $20 million that is now allocated that you have to cover, and scholarships are going up, I think there's a lot of behind closed doors conversations right now about how you're going to support these other Olympic sports that aren't major players on your campus that, were a nice offering for people, but now what type of competitive advantage are they going to be at when they're still stuck either at a small scholarship level, or you have to eliminate them completely to pay for the sports that you are bringing up to the max capacity of funding limit, which for us, 11.7 to 34, that's a huge value prop for us. So we're really excited about it.
First of all, what an amazing question for this kind of panel, right? The professionalism of collegiate athletics. So what I hear in my head ringing is like the integrity of the game. I've heard coaches say, man, we're messing up the integrity of the game right now, especially being able to transfer at will. Like, I've seen scholar athletes come in and be gone in 3 to 6 months. But it's just like the professionalism of the game. Once you put in professional type things, then you can regulate. Like, I always go back. We have some of the smartest people in this country. If we're able to play through the world's craziest pandemic and play a football season, we can figure out how to equitably empower scholar athletes and keep the integrity of our game and put some regulations in place so that it can be the game that we love and continue to love, and it still has those things. So I think future, and I was thinking earlier, you need to be the first person when there's a college draft calling out the first draft pick. That's what I heard earlier, by the way. But so when you're able to put some regulations, you're able to cut into a lot of those things. I've thought about ideas like you said, hey, should there be a trust? But a trust for athletes and kind of helping them as young people with money. I just think about it as soccer or tennis, when you can literally go pro 13, 14, 15, and being able to learn from some of their successes and failures and being able to bring that into the game. I think financial literacy and things like that have to be mandated. and be a part of the structure. Even if it's, let's just say hypothetically, you're 100% employee, but hey, if you're coming to this educational institute to play for, you're going to have to invest some money and dollars here, you know? So I think, again, I think we have the people smart enough to be able to figure it out. But once you turn into professionalism, you can put the regulations in place, and you're not going to see athletes transferring after 3 to 6 months anymore, right?
Yeah, the financial literacy thing we talked about, and I think that that's important as far as escrowing money. I don't know what the legalities of that would be, but listen, you give people money, people are going to do people things. Some are going to be responsible, some are going to be irresponsible. I don't know that you can sort of legislate that. The way I sort of think about this, I think about how undervalued, especially college football and college basketball are. And I think there needs to be fundamental change. So where I think, we get to a lot of these solutions is how do we grow the pie? How do we make sure that there's more revenue coming into collegiate athletics that hopefully can be dispersed in a more equitable basis throughout all of the collegiate sports, baseball, the Olympic sports. But I think that there's so much revenue being left on the table by the inefficiency that currently exists in collegiate athletics. There's obviously a huge appetite for it. Right? The most popular sport in the country is NFL football. The second most popular sport in the country is college football. And yet college football doesn't generate the second most amount of media revenue. Well, why is that? I think it's just because of the inefficiency of the way that the system is set up. And again, there's a few strong and a lot of middles and then, some weak. And to your point, I think that there's going to be a bifurcation between the top tier of collegiate football and that next tier, which is still great, but it's not going to be the same thing. I think there's going to be, at least two different types of football programs in this country at some point down the road. And, I think that also, when you start to think about the arms race that's happened in stadium development, other facilities, like that's appropriate for some colleges, that's not appropriate for all colleges. And how do we make sure that we're placing the right athletes and the right students in the right environments? And I think that, by exploiting and being able to maximize the revenue that's generated from the money sports, hopefully it trickles down in some reasonable way to support what I think is an important thing for every university to do, which is to give their student athletes an opportunity to compete. I also think that probably there's going to be, and this is almost the way it is now, some of the Olympic sports are almost going to be run like club sports, where, students are going to have to, maybe fund themselves for some of this stuff, which would be unfortunate. But, at some point, it's fair that the athletes that are generating the massive amounts of revenue through college football and college basketball are the ones who are going to benefit the most from all of that.
If I can touch one more part of that,
Sure.
because Jim asked an amazing question, and a part that kind of got overlooked was the part that's right now. So he talked about some jealousy, whether it's in the locker room or it's across campus between student and athlete. And I kind of laugh, and it touches on what you just ended with. Like, this is life. So the better young people can go through stuff that they're going to face when they're in life, it's fine. Like, you able to adapt and adjust to kind of things. It's just like it's more hypersensitive that I've been told, hey, you get a free education. Where I say you get free holidays. You get to be home for Christmas and Thanksgiving. I don't. You get to go to a 12 to 16 week internships and build for your future. I can't. So things like that, I'd laugh at internally and just say, hey, that's life. But the earlier you can go through things like that, how much more prepared are you when it really comes about, right? I'll think about being a 3-year starter, 4-year starter for the Tigers, and new defense coordinator come in. I go to a second string safety, right? And I lose my starting position for 5 weeks, right? Got it back, right? But I think about when I'm at Merrill Lynch and I get laid off for failing the Series 66 for 4 times in a row, last 2 times by 1 point. But those times prepared me, because what helped me get my starting position back was my attitude, was being the most optimistic and energetic person in the room, not sulking, but saying, hey, I'm not going to let man take away what I believe God has for me. So let me beat this thing with a positive attitude. It was the same thing with Merrill Lynch. So it prepared me for that when I was in real life.
I also think some of this goes back to what does the college believe its mission is, and is giving an opportunity for student athletes to compete, is that core to our mission. And I get a little bit of a chuckle whenever I read articles where it talks about the athletic department is spending this much money on athletics or they're underwater. And I always, the first thing that comes to mind, and no offense to the academics here, how much money does the English department make? Like everybody's concerned about, like, is the athletic department making money? Like, it's part of the student experience. It's part of our mission. It's part of what we're here to do. And sometimes that costs money and sometimes that generates money. But I just think that athletics, unfortunately, is put into a negative light when people want to look at collegiate budgets and say, oh, you're spending this much money on athletics, as though that's not important, which I fundamentally don't believe in, because I know that, you know, being an athlete was fundamental to everything that happened in my life after that. And I'm sure every collegiate athlete would say the same thing. So it's just, you know, what's our mission? What do we believe our mission is? And what are we willing to invest in that mission?
Got time for another question? Anyone's got something they want to ask? I'm an investor in a company in Atlanta called American Spirit Whiskey, and the owners of that distillery said, do not buy Tito's vodka. And they're Georgia alums, and they said Tito's is funded the University of Texas football program. And so they created a label called Hunker Down Vodka that they are marketing heavily and hard to every tailgater at a University of Georgia football game. And they're literally walking around tailgate to tailgate, say, you know, you're supporting UT. You know, so this is not just the opportunities for alumni to get involved, to help with all this, is not just dropping money on the table. It also can help drive their businesses as well. So lots of really cool opportunities for almost a partnership, right, with the student athletes and the university in ways that nobody had ever thought of. Can you all think of any other ways or any other interesting ways that our student athletes are taking advantage of this?
I can think of a lot, but I'll just say I would challenge scholar athletes, student athletes, and students. You know, think about it. If you're the top quarterback or top pitcher, and you have influence, y'all have like 30, 100,000 followers now, man, you can get together and have your own camps. Like it's things that if you sit down or you just put it in the chat GPT, it'll give you great ideas and you can roll that into, okay, who do I need to leverage because my time's here? But I just think about camps. I think about, you know, some of the low hanging fruit, the t-shirts, the bands, things that at least give you the experience while making some money, right? So I think about the low-hanging fruit there.
My son was a football player at the University of Nebraska, and some of his teammates decided they were going to charge $5,000 to go on a Husker hunt. And by gosh, they got their trip paid for, and alumni went out and took them into South Dakota, I think, and they went hunting. And so there's all kinds, if you can imagine it, there's opportunities to create micro businesses or experiences. That's what this is. It's not just, you know, a take. There's real opportunities here.
I'll give a free plug and real example here. We took 23, 24 scholar athletes to Los Angeles, and our last visit was NFL media. And they start talking about all these YouTubers are stealing our content and video anyway. So, hey, we're starting to actually license out some of our literal game film and allowing you to come in. And if you want to be a commentator over it, you can. So, like things like that, I think about. Like companies are thinking about athletes and students and regular people in that way. So why not take advantage of the opportunity to have official content and you have a passion for being a commentator one day and get on YouTube and monetize. So just stuff like that, think outside the box with.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all these people who are making money as, quote, influencers. I can't think of people who would be more positive influencers than, you know, people who are student athletes who already have a following, to your point. If you've got 20, 30, 40,000 people, 100,000 people who are following you, I mean, you've got a business, you just haven't figured out what the product is.
I would say,
This guy right here, goes by and destroy. He started this 7 years ago, lost his scholarship. So this is how fast this has escalated.
Yep.
He was one of the first. He has over 5 million followers. And it started out as a trick shot artist, as a kicker. And he was getting money through it. He lost his NCAA, took his scholarship. That was in 2017. And he's continued doing this. And it's unbelievable where he's taken this to just by starting out as a kicking trick shot artist. And he's still kicking. I mean, He went 3 years. I gave him an opportunity 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and he disappeared. Not on social media.
Mm.
And then we gave him another opportunity last year. Made the UFL.
Nice.
Kicking great. Unfortunately, got hurt on a kickoff. After he kicked the ball, but he'll be back this year. But this guy has an unbelievable following. Just thinking outside the box. And when you meet him, extraordinary person, and probably has 50 ideas of what you can do to make money.
Is that a headline of him suing the NCAA for not being able to capitalize?
17 article, because I knew when this was going to come up. I went back to
so
look
good.
when it actually happened to him, and then you realize how fast this has all escalated to get where we are. It was just 7 years ago when NCAA took his scholarship and said you can't play college football.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful we're not stuck in that time, because athletes creating their own individual brands is obviously super valuable, but what's even more valuable than the individual brand is the power of the team. And how many of you would have the reverence you have for Clemson if Clemson was one of the 4 schools you went to because you were chasing a little bit of money? So for us to answer Andy's question about what other creative ideas do you have, well, we're going to use the biggest brand we have, which is the Clemson baseball team and our facility, as ways to then create interest to make money for our individual players that can all participate in, NIL dollars, not just through individual opportunities, which a lot of our guys are pursuing, great individual opportunities, but the power of team and being a part of a team and being able to use the team as a way to create interest for all of them collectively, something we're down the rabbit hole on. So mark your calendar, November 7th. There'll be an announcement.
All right.
November 7th. So Savannah Bananas are going to be playing in April this year in Death Valley. It'll be the largest attended baseball game on planet Earth. But before that, they're coming to Clemson and Doug Kingsmore Stadium.
That hadn't been announced yet, Andy.
He said it.
But
That's all right. It's announced.
and using the brand in that way is really interesting. I have a niece who plays professional soccer, and she played for Angel City, which is the Los Angeles NWSL team. And they had a really interesting mechanism where the players got 1% of the gate revenue every single game, which I thought was like a really interesting thing. It kind of got them out there, and Angel City doesn't need to sell tickets or sold out every game. But I just thought that was an interesting way to sort of directly compensate them for what was happening. It was kind of outside their normal contract. So I think creating those opportunities through the platform, that's the biggest one, to your point, and having that, flow directly to the athletes is an interesting mechanism.
Yeah, for sure. And we're looking at hosting concerts in our stadium. We're looking at all kinds of things, and it's been through the help of Andy and a lot of his teammates. Brian Kowitz is back there. A lot of the guys from the 90s have been just so, instrumental in coming up, helping us, kind of create all these ideas. So it's the power of the entire network, the alums, coaches, players, everything. But it's obviously a real issue, real topic, and we can all tackle it together.
I have a question. For those who don't know me, my name is Jaron Purify. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And as this gentleman over here mentioned, he went to Michigan State, graduated, and he noticed like the hardships that the inner city Detroit kids went through, and that how they can't pay their bills and how they have struggles just trying to get through life. I just like to say I have kind of the same background. So my question for Brian, and if you guys want to answer as well, is for athletes who come from a very small background, who have very little opportunity, and who are really good at the sport they play, but don't have like the financial literacy aspects, and who haven't really been in the position to advocate for themselves. As an investor who has a background in professional sports, what type of players are you really looking for to spend your time and invest with, and what type of things do they have, and what do they need to kickstart their NIL approach?
Yeah. So from an investment perspective, we're not in the business of investing directly in athletes, but as a professional and somebody who has spent his life around athletes, I think that, I'm deeply invested in athletes, if that makes sense, not like from an investment perspective. But I think that what you'll find, and I would say to leverage the opportunities you have here at Clemson University, there are, and an incredible number of people that want to see you all succeed. They want you to get off on the right track. So I think that there are opportunities for you to tap into alumni, to tap into, coaches, to tap into administrators. Everybody wants to see you guys succeed. But one of the things, and I used to work for the New York Knicks, and we used to do this program every single year called the Business of Basketball, where we'd sit down with all the players and talk to them about the way the business worked around them. Like, they knew what was going on the court, and we tried to explain it to them. And we told them that, listen, you are a professional athlete for however much time you have to do that. Right now, the world is watching you, right? Sitting courtside at Madison Square Garden, we're captains of industry, right? People who were big fans and were millionaires or billionaires said, you can get a meeting with anybody right now that you want. You can tap into those people whenever you want, right? And Steve Francis, who was a Knick player, he would say to me, like, okay, so I want to get into the investment world. I had him sit down with Ken Chenault, who's the CEO of American Express, who sat courtside. So that's one level. But even here at Clemson, every alum would, if you wanted a meeting with them, to ask them about, hey, professional investor in investment in companies, how do I handle my money? How do I what? These people will talk to you and will try to help you right now. So I would say sometimes it's hard when we're living our life to think of ourselves in a way that's bigger than just a normal student, but you have a platform. And what I would say to any student athlete, use the platform you have. Like, people generally are going to want to help just because they want to help. And then because you're a Clemson student athlete, they're going to want to help you even more. So I think if I could give you one piece of advice, is tap into the networks that are around you right now. Don't be bashful about it. Don't be shy about it. Don't be embarrassed by it. Go and exploit it, because they will give you the time of day and they want to help you and they want you to succeed.
Awesome. I want to thank Brian, Richard, and Coach for this wonderful panel. Put your hands together. Thank you so much. Awesome.